This episode of Maria Milai's podcast is presented by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Welcome to the first chapter of Maria Milai's podcast. This podcast is focused on affordable and clean energy, which is a UN Sustainable Development Goal. So back to the topic. Today we're going to answer the research question: given the improvements from modern sources of generating wind power and long-term plans to cut down carbon emissions, can Mexico efficiently use wind power to produce more than 50% of the nation's energy? So we need to have in mind that coal, oil, and natural gas are three types of fossil fuels. Currently, we depend on them to meet our energy needs, whether for heating our homes or for supplying the fuel to our cars, among other means of transport. Fossil fuels were formed from plants and animals that lived millions of years ago, and that after being underground in certain conditions, their remains ended up transforming into the combustible material we know and use today. The dilemma with fossil fuels is that they are not renewable, which means that the supply is limited. And the problem is not only that someday the stock on the planet will be truly exhausted, making it challenging for humans to live, but through their use, a series of environmental problems develop. For example, during its combustion, carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere, greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. Therefore, the energy application of fossil fuels is considered as the main factor that triggers the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. In fact, during the 20th century, it was estimated that the temperature of the planet increased by 0.6 degrees, a phenomenon that is related to the industrial growth and development that took place in that period. As I said earlier, the impact of climate change affects the entire planet, not only the most industrialized areas. For example, it is well known that in the Arctic and Antarctic, the progressive increase in temperature is causing the melting of glaciers, which in turn causes the rise in sea level worldwide and affects the composition of the water in the oceans. Air pollution is also one of the world's problems due to the use of fossil fuels, which affects human health and the development of ecosystems. Other environmental problems associated with fossil fuels appear as soon as they are extracted. There may be oil spills that severely damage a whole ecosystem, or the state in which the area surrounding the explosion of a carbon mine is located. Everyone, including the companies that exploit these non-renewable resources, know about this risk involved. But as long as renewable energies are not a viable alternative as the primary source of energy, we will continue to depend on fossil fuels to keep up with the pace of our current development. The wind, the sun, and the water are perfect sources of energy, depending on where you are. They are renewable, they do not pollute, and every day they are more efficient. With its use, the emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is reduced, and our dependence on fossil fuels is greatly diminished. Taking advantage of the energy contained in these sources, we can obtain electricity, and there is more than enough to cover the needs of everyone. However, the challenge is to do it efficiently and profitably, economically, below the cost of producing the energy with fossil fuels, as well as being able to store it for use at the time we need. In order for us to know more about this topic, I interviewed an economist at Letza Tecnologías Sustentables, as well as the person in charge of human resources at Grupo Comexidro. This company works through the business of Eólica Santa Catarina, which promotes, develops, and builds the wind farm in Santa Catarina. Finally, I interviewed a graduated as an engineer in sustainable development who is currently a teacher at Prepatec Santa Catarina, teaching the IV subject of environmental systems and societies. So, to all the public listening to me, I want you to know that it is very important to have reliable sources. For example, in this case, We have people, experts, that can talk about this topic. Also, it's very important to understand the point of view of a person who works in the renewable energy sector, or in this case, of the teacher, who is someone that knows genuinely about renewable energies. But back to the question, we want to know if they believe it is possible that Mexico efficiently uses wind power to produce more than 50% of the nation's energy. So, analyzing the answers given, I realized that we have a great need to reduce CO2 emissions. And although the commitment to generate alternative energy sources has advanced, the speed of this process is still not enough. And as the economist said, it's important to point out that the objectives set in the Paris Agreement have not been achieved. And although the president elected signed it, he still has in his plans to open 5 refineries. Wind power is one of the most competitive renewable energies today. Even though it implies a significant investment, operation costs are meager compared to the conventional technology. Socially, wind power will have a social impact in favor of morality. Mexican citizens will be more aware of the importance of caring for the planet. They will see that there is a real investment on the part either from the government or the private sector. On the other hand, there will be an impact on both the national gross domestic product and the creation of jobs. The wind industry in Mexico will help the national industry to improve. Also, there will be a significant effect not only in the construction sector, but also in the machinery and equipment industry, metal products and electrical generation equipment, among others. Also, the installation of wind turbines will involve the creation of 45,000 jobs, with a particular impact on construction and metal products. Besides, wind power creates an additional income to landlords, which main activities are agriculture and stock breeding. Wind farms generate new jobs and economic benefits near the region created, since the income of families is raised. The environmental benefits of this technology has a significant role in lowering the greenhouse effect gases that usually are related to the creation of electricity. The use of wind energy has no impact on the physiochemical characteristics of the soil or its erosion, given the fact that no pollutant that affects this medium nor spills or large movements of land are produced, contrary to what can happen with conventional energies. On the other hand, we do have some disadvantages, but they are the fewer. For example, the development period is extended since a developer starts to build a wind farm until it begins its energy release to the electricity grid. It can take up to 5 years. Its storage is impossible, which means that the electricity energy produced is not storable, and if it is not instantly consumed, it will be lost. Too much wind is not useful. On the contrary, if the wind exceeds the specifications of the wind turbine, it is mandatory to disconnect that circuit from the network or change the inclination of the blades so that they don't stop turning, since with high-speed wind the structure can be damaged. Electricity production decreases and affects the planned generation of electricity. So, as I said, above that all three specialists believe that Mexico is perfectly capable of generating 50% of its energy from wind power. As I mentioned, there are significant economic benefits from having wind power, and Mexico has the resources to implement such technologies. It is just a matter of proper industrial organization. It will also create thousands of jobs, which consequently helps the country. From the ecological aspect, there are tons of reasons why this should be done, but the most important is wind energy does not pollute, is inexhaustible, and slows down the depletion of fossil fuels, preventing climate change. Also, it will dramatically help with the energy crisis, since half of the whole country won't just rely on fossil fuels, giving Mexico a noticeable advantage within their habitat destruction, given the fact that Mexico is considered a mega diverse country. And so that's it for today, guys. The question was answered. We do believe it's possible that Mexico generates 50% of its energy from wind power. We'll be here tomorrow at the same hour for more about wind power and other UN Sustainable Development Goals. See you tomorrow and drive safely.